thank you so much, Adam, for joining me today. Super excited to chat about what you and Triarchy are doing. It's a sibling-owned company, right? Which is very unique and awesome to
Yes,
work with your family on something you're dedicating decades of your life to, maybe even life's work to is really incredible to do it alongside family. So that's pretty awesome. So before we get into everything that you're doing now and the brand and everything you're thinking about in the future in the world of denim, talk about your journey, and maybe we could start a little bit about your time in the Italy factory, sort of learning about denim. If you want to
yeah,
take us a little bit previously before that, that's up to you. But it feels like that's a really cool place to start. Is how'd you even get to a denim factory floor in Italy to learn about
for
this stuff?
sure. I always say that denim found me because it was never something that I sought out. I had this random opportunity come in front of me where a friend introduced me to these guys who owned factories in Italy when they were in Vancouver, which is where I'm from. And they asked us to help them find somebody that could be their North American liaison for the licensed brands that they held. And I was fresh out of university, so I was like, I can do that. I'll come back and forth to Italy and help you guys sell jeans.
Gladly.
Sure, gladly. So it was about an hour southeast of Rome, kind of just right in the
Hmm.
center near Campobasso. But I started going back and forth and escorting them to the trade shows in Vegas and basically just being the guy who speaks English. But after a while, I noticed that they were paying money for licenses, and yet the onus was still on them to pay for marketing for these brands that didn't have any exposure either. So I was kind of thinking, why don't you guys just start your own brand?
Right.
Because you own the
Yep.
factory and you have access to all of the things, and then you can save these licensing fees and just put them into your own brand. And so they asked me to help them find a designer to do that. And so instead of doing that, I went and taught myself how to use Illustrator and design them a collection, which I thought they're either going to laugh at me or they're going to buy it. And it was the latter, which was great. And so we developed this line together right in 2008. And when we were ready to bring it to market was when 2008 happened. And
Sure.
it was really sad because the factories shut down, and this town where I was working was really the kind of town in Italy where everyone was related and they all took me in, and
Mm-hmm.
I could walk down the street and everyone's like, oh, ciao Adam, like it was
Yeah.
really special. And then it ended, and so I left, but I came back to Canada with this near 2 year crash course on all things denim, and it kind of clearly resonated with me, and I didn't want to let go of it. So I sat down with my brother and sister. My brother at the time was building motorbikes and my sister was modeling, and we just kind of sat down and I said, this feels kind of both of what you two are doing lean
Right.
into denim as well. So why don't we just recalibrate this? And we did, and we brought it to market. We named the brand Triarchy because Triarchy means three things coming together to make one, which is
Awesome.
the three of us. And we brought it to market and we got it into stores in Canada, and then we started building the e-com, and it started growing, and we were totally, not going to say unprepared, we were completely lost at sea in this world. But when it became clear that we would need to look for bigger production
Mm.
than what we currently had, because when you're operating in these little facilities that are a few tables of sewing machines and maybe one or
Right.
two laundry machines going, it doesn't really set off any warning bells, right? You're just making jeans. But
Right.
when I went to look at these facilities where you would aspire to grow to, it just became, I started looking down this football field of washing machines spewing water. And I just thought, I don't actually aspire to occupy a facility like this. So
Yeah.
we kind of had to sit down and say, what are our goals here? Because if we just want to blow this up and just be another consumptive brand, then that
Right.
doesn't really resonate with any of us. So I think if we remove the ego from the project, then the reality is the world doesn't need another denim brand, of
Yeah.
course.
Right.
So if we are going to do this, we have to do it in a way that is going to make jeans better. And we have no idea what that means. So basically, we have to just stop what we're doing and we have to put the time and the work in to figure out how to do that. And of
Yeah.
course, the word sustainability is definitely the umbrella term that it was the wild, wild west of sustainability back then. I mean,
Yeah.
literally no one knew anything. But, with trial and tribulation and talking to vendors and expressing concerns about water consumption and chemical use and how cotton is grown, and then learning off of these people and just working through so many different options, we finally arrived at sort of a blueprint for how to make jeans better. And then we found partners who we could do that with. And then once you kind of get rid of all the noise and you find these people who are just as genuinely passionate about bettering the industry, that's when we started growing together. And so we still work with the same people who, you know, when you go in to look at fabrics and they're showing you 600 different types of denim, but we can't use any of them because one of the things we did to become a more responsible company was to eliminate plastic. So every pair of stretch jeans that anyone's ever owned contains plastic in it, right? And what that means is that you have microplastics when you wash them. And it also means at the end of life, that's probably going to sit in a landfill for 200 years. There are technologies that can separate fibers, which I think are great. But I also think that if you're not actually supervising the return of the garments to those facilities, it's not really something we felt comfortable leaning on. So we just eliminated plastic, which meant we were a denim brand that didn't have stretch jeans, which, as you can imagine, is kind of problematic. But after a while of going into all these meetings with vendors and they're showing us a football field worth of stretch denim, and we said, no, we can't look at that. Eventually people started paying attention, and then our denim mill in Italy, Candiani, they developed a natural rubber alternative to plastic stretch. And so we brought that to market first for women, which was just the holy grail of denim. And so basically we replace plastic with rubber, and that gives you a stretch jean that will biodegrade under 2 years under the right conditions, no microplastics, and then no 200 years in landfill. So that's kind of a great story of how we decided to stop something. Vendors started saying like, it doesn't Triarchy, why don't they want to look at any of these fabrics? And then they're like, let's innovate something better. And we experienced that in a lot of different facets of what we do.
Are they, for the rubber, are they making like new rubber? Because rubber is also a material that never kind of goes away, right? If it ends in the landfill, then it's going to stay there. Big fan of Indosole. They basically grab all these old tires from landfill and make sneaker soles out of them. So you could essentially team up with somebody like that to just get rubber that's already exists, right? Is that possible? And then actually embed that into the supply chain.
That was one of our questions. And the way that the flow of a new technology like this works is you perfect the construction with virgin materials. Because you have the consistency there.
Gotcha.
For example, a big marketing tool of late is to shout about how, we get our stretch from recycled water bottles. And that's great, because if you make a product that has to have stretch, and that's a reality of the business, and that's what you do. But the thing is that when you're taking something that was intended to be a water bottle and then you're turning it into stretch for jeans, you have to add things to make it do that. And so oftentimes those ingredients aren't disclosed in the whole plastic part of the fabric. And so in the same way as doing the rubber, we don't want to add anything. So for right now, we're just using virgin rubber until the technology is perfected in a way that we can actually add another natural substance to the recycled. And the hard part is we can't add a synthetic something.
Sure.
And there aren't a lot of natural somethings we can add. So it's a little bit like.
How far? Because I spoke, the really cool thing about this sector is that there are crazy amount of new materials being made, right? And technology trying to be infused in this whole ecosystem, right? I mean, fashion is a really, really massive industry, but it's also a massive contributor to CO2 emissions, right? And pollution, because it is such a massive, massive industry at scale at a global level. Have you noticed, like, I guess, where are we at in sort of the technology just in the denim world, right? I guess what can be produced, what is being produced, and where might we see those innovations with, specifically in the denim space, because it is a bit tougher with denim because it is by nature kind of a long-lasting product itself, right? I mean, I got jeans from 12 years ago, right? That's the one.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, because we just, in doing life cycle assessments and discussing the end of life of jeans, I always say, if you make jeans well, they shouldn't have an end of life.
Yeah.
Like, use good materials, construct them well. The pair of jeans I'm wearing right now, I've repaired the crotch on them twice because they will blow out if you wear them every day for over a year. And so you just find a good denim repair shop and you take them in and they fix them. And guess what? You've got another year on those jeans. And you can keep doing that indefinitely. I mean, I'm sure eventually you're going to have an issue. So we do have to take the end of life into account. And so in order to take the end of life into account, of course, we do things like, no plastic, because that's something that's important to us. And then we also have to look at how are we, what materials are we using then? Like, are we using organic cotton versus natural cotton, or not natural, just versus generic cotton, which is a big conversation for us because organic, for us is much better. It's a cleaner product that regenerates the soil. And so, but then what we found is that a lot of the times you'll buy something that's organic cotton and then you ask for the cotton certificate and somehow that's not available. And then I uncovered this whole other world where the actual yield that the earth is capable of producing in organic cotton is a certain number. And if every brand that actually says they used organic cotton that number is X10. So the disparity between real organic cotton and people who just say it's organic cotton is a chasm. And so it's nice to see the industry turning its focus onto regenerative cotton or transitional cotton, which gives farmers the motivation to, transition their soil and still have crops that people want to buy. And so we're trying to get our mills to get behind that in a way and introduce a new word for consumers. So instead of just reading cotton or organic, to read transitional cotton on a label, to know what that means and to assign value to it. Because to me, that's the most valuable of the cottons now.
Do you ever, because look, there's so much that goes into all this, right? And there's never going to be a perfect model, whether it's the beginning of the life or the end of life of the product. Like, it's never going to be perfect, right? And so as consumers, like, it's tough because we don't want to be like discouraged of like, hey, am I buying this? Like, what do I need to read? What do I need to read? It becomes so intense that, I think people then just gravitate towards, I'm just going to buy the shit that's the easiest because I'm stressing out by looking at all this stuff, right?
But on that note, that was exactly what we realized. And we really talked about it and said, when somebody is going to buy a pair of jeans, it shouldn't be, okay, today is jean buying day. Let me open my laptop and get educated on all things on how you make jeans. That is not your job. That is my job.
Right.
And so how are we lacking in the communication to the customer that makes it easy, like you said?
It's great.
So they can gravitate towards the easy, but the easy is actually the best. And so what we did is we employed third-party auditors because I don't think unfortunately, in this world we're in right now, you can't be trusted to make claims on behalf of your own brand. It's just it's not something that I wanted to rely on, even though I know that we have a very strict responsibility lens and we do operate with integrity, but you don't know that. We know that. And so getting a third-party auditor to vet everything we say we do and then publish that information independent of us in easy to digest ways was a very smart investment for us. So first of all, we employed Green Story. Yeah. And they actually have team members in Amsterdam and I love them.
Yeah.
And they
actually met with the founder a couple months ago. Actually, we sat down and talked. He's the best, man. Green Story is awesome.
Yeah. And so we first worked with them. And so what they basically do is take all the information per every single garment. So it's not a general brand reading, it's individually per garment. And so we get QR codes for each garment. And so anything Triarchy makes and sells on the shop floor, you can take out your phone, you can scan the QR code and you'll get a page that shows you equivalencies in the amount of days of drinking water saved, light bulb energy use avoided, land farmed without pesticides, and the carbon offset to make it carbon neutral. And so, and it comes up in just one screen. very
Yep.
easy to understand.
Yep.
And so for me, for a customer to just literally scan that and then be like, oh, okay, well,
It's huge. Yeah.
that's a lot of information. And then on the other side of that label, we work with Retraced, which is blockchain verified supply chain. And so on the Retraced QR code, you literally scan that and it'll bring up a map, like an Indiana Jones style map with all the points and a line connecting them from where we grew the cotton, how it was shipped over to where the denim was made, how we made that, where our factory is. There's no secrets. It's all there. If you want to know anyone we work with for anything you buy, it's right there. And then you can actually click through to all those businesses and you can see all the information about the individual business. You can even see pictures of the factory, how many male employees, female employees, any certifications. The PFDs of the certifications will be uploaded and you can download them. And that's unique per garment. So for us, it was, how do we make the easy choice the best choice?
I want to go back to, we said the broad word of sustainability, right? And that word has been, around. I mean, look, you said that could
sustainability.
So how do we go to the next stage of all this, right? Because like you said, anybody can say it, it's really hard to do it. It's really hard to implement it, right?
So we, like I said, rest in peace, sustainability, because we don't use that word anymore, because unfortunately all of the integrity that was once associated with it is gone. So moving back a letter in the alphabet, what comes before sustainability is responsibility. And so we landed on responsibility for a couple of reasons. One, because if we're really going to be honest, the only sustainable brand is one that doesn't exist, because we are making products that are new. And so I don't care how you cut it, it's not sustainable. Okay. We're all
metaverse jeans. Metaverse jeans will be sustainable.
But please, let's not get into the metaverse right now. I don't have the bandwidth for metaverse right now. But responsible resonates with us, and that has integrity. That. When I say responsible, when I hear responsible, when I see it on the wall here, I'm like, okay, that has integrity. I can operate a brand under that word. And so when someone asks what that means, we talk about all the things that we're talking about: the organic cotton, the wash processes we use in place of the harmful ones, the types of cotton, why they're important to us, how we source things, life cycle assessments, all of these efforts, Green Story, Retrace, that all falls under the banner of responsibility. And there's nothing sustainable about any of that. It's just we're making denim responsibly. We're trying to make jeans better, and that's what we're doing. And yes, of course, a lot of the things that we're doing fall under a sustainable banner too, because of, if you want to dive into that. But it just, sadly, if I can walk past a fast fashion window and see the S word, I can't use the S word. So we use the R word instead. And I hope that it just pivots over to that without losing integrity.
You had mentioned before that the process in which you saw it firsthand, whether it was in Italy and sort of when you started to make stuff initially versus now, I guess, and just for for a consumer, right? When you talk about, fast fashion and stuff like that, can you talk a little bit about just the manufacturing of jeans in sort of the really negative way that is super impactful versus, like a Triarchy way, right? And sort of what you learned and then broke it down and say, hey, this is how we do it more responsibly, because this way is very, very harmful. And it can be done better, right? It can be done more responsibly.
Yeah. I mean, so that beautiful light wash vintage Levi's pair of jeans that we love so much, that color that I'm referring to, if you wanted to achieve that with a new pair of jeans, so basically any denim you ever buy comes in that rich dark blue color. So you pick the denim that you want to use and you cut and sew it, and then you would start to apply a series of wash processes that would likely look like a stone wash. So you're going to put the denim in a huge vat with rocks, and you're going to beat them up with water. You drain that, and you can't really repurpose that water because it has all the stone runoff. So you're just discarding that. And then you're probably going to do an acid or a bleach to get some of the pigment down. And so you're going to need hot water, you're going to need bleach, you might use acid, and you're just going to play around with the chemicals to get it down further to the desired shade. You might stone wash it again to just really get it into all those beautiful shades. And then you're going to discard all of the acid water, bleach water, stone wash water, there are various different ways in which you can discard it, and some countries have very strict rules in which you have to have certain treatment facilities, and some countries have none. And so literally all these things I'm talking about are just going into a river. There's a really phenomenal film called River Blue that just peers into the underbelly of the denim industry and shows you how just abhorrently shocking it can be in countries with no restrictions as to how you discard of things. But then when you're done beating all of that up and you've washed them and dried them and you want to hand process them, so you're going to get someone to literally spray potassium permanganate on them, which is a chemical, and then scrape them and rip them and tear them. And it's really just in the way that I've described this. We've used 3 or 4 hazardous chemicals. We've beaten them with rocks and stones, and it's just been a very consumptive process. So what these companies set out to do that we work with is, how do we mimic all of those procedures in completely new ways? So there's a few technologies. One of them is an e-flow machine, which basically takes a cup of water, the equivalent of a cup of water, and turns it into a vapor spray that has an enzyme on the skin of a nanobubble. So the vapor spray makes these little nanobubbles, and when they hit the denim and they explode, it causes little abrasions. And so that's obviously, we're talking about a cup of water to do that process, and then that's a clean discharge as well. The ozone machine takes O2 and converts it into O3, which is a natural gas that'll, I guess you would say, it's kind of like exposure. It'll allow the color to come down. You could actually leave something in the ozone for an hour and it'll bleach it, which we used to do with our vintage stuff. And it's also disinfecting. And then at the end of the process, it reconverts the O3 back into O2. So there's no harmful discharge. And then instead of potassium permanganate and hand scraping and cutting, we use lasers. So you just design the pattern on the computer, and then the laser burns all the whiskers and the holes into the jeans. So that'll give you.
So being more efficient, really, too, right? I mean,
it's more efficient.
Responsibility is just really being efficient.
Yeah, and now if you put both of those pairs, the aforementioned and then the way that I just described them next to each other, now the technology is so good that they will look identical, but truly behind the curtain, it's a completely different industry. It's a different practice. Like it's not the same. And that's what I always say when I'm showing the product to buyers is like, you look at a rack of Triarchy and you think, oh, look, it's a rack of denim. Like I've seen a rack of denim for the last however long I've been in this business. But the truth is behind the scenes, there's nothing similar about how we make jeans to how they've been made traditionally. It's completely different.
When you talk about the business side of e-commerce versus getting into boutiques or selling wholesale, like what has that journey been like? And how do you see, even with the emergence, obviously, of e-commerce the last sort of decade is sort of exploding. Is that the majority of the business, or do you still like to be in stores? Because jeans is like, you still have to try them on, right? Like that's the sort of the caveat of all this is.
So what we learn and what we keep learning is that denim is not an easy online purchase. A lot of the online purchases, people will buy 3 sizes. And then, try on what works, send back what doesn't. And so for me, I really think the in-store experience is pivotal for jeans. You need to go in and try on styles and sizes and see what. And the thing too is, if you have just spent the last 10 years wearing stretch, and let's say you're a 28, stretch is very forgiving. And so you're a 28 and then you want to pivot over to rigid. And so you order a 28 and that doesn't fit.
Right.
Because in reality, a lot of brands have been doing vanity sizing forever. Plus you have stretch, so those numbers on the tags, it's such a, there's such a disparity.
It's not uniform across.
It's not uniform. So one brand, you're a 25, one brand, you're a 26, one brand, you're a 27, one brand, you're a 28. So when people are coming and they're buying something online and it's just, there's no uniformity and it just becomes a really big problem. Whereas if you're in a store, you just grab a handful and try them on and then be like, okay, these work. And so interestingly, our wholesale business is doing really incredibly. I think we came up at an interesting time where, the pandemic really shone a light on I think for a lot of stores, it just really highlight that on the tail end of this, it's going to be really hard to try to get people to buy things that are just here for the sake of buying them.
Mm,
And so maybe we should try to get behind brands that are actually trying to do things better and that can back up what they're doing. And so a lot of our wholesale partners came to us out of curiosity for what we were doing, and then really resonated with what we were doing and brought us on board. And not only just brought us on board, but really leaned on us to shout about what we were doing. And then through their teams, like the ESG teams, they really started bringing on people that were asking us hard questions. So instead of just trusting us, because a lot of the times with stores say, oh, cool, these guys are sustainable. Like, let's use that word and say that that's, but now I'm getting emails. Can you please send us the organic cotton certificates? Can you please show us your receipts from Tencel? Can you know, they're asking me to send them the carbon offset certificates and all.
You're like
of these
happy
things.
to do it. Been
I'm
waiting
like,
for this.
by all
been
means,
waiting for this for years.
Truly, I have all these folders that have just been collecting dust on the desktop, and now I'm firing off certificates and it's you know, I think one of the main deterrents for people to go down this road is like, like if someone asks me something and I don't have the answer, it's going to make me look bad. But the truth is, if I get asked something and I say, oh, we don't have that, thank you for shining a light on where we had a gap. Great, let's fill that. It's all good. It's not, no one's out for blood here. Like, we're just helping each other out and, you know, moving in a better direction. So the wholesale partners have been great for those two reasons. One, because I think they already have a very strong following, each individually to themselves, and they really do want to start shouting about more responsible practices. And so if people can go in for those reasons and then just grab a handful and see what actually works in real life and leave the store with something, then that makes everybody happy.
You had mentioned before we got on the call, you had, you know, can't come to a first sort of, you know, expo actually here in Amsterdam, and I guess it was what, like a denim sort of like expo or conference.
That's the big, it's the world's biggest, it's the confluence of all the denim everything's.
Give us an overall feel of what was going on, sort of what is top of mind for whether it's buyers, you know, obviously, you know, manufacturers and makers. Just give us a lay of the land of just the denim industry right now. And are you sort of optimistic or deeply frustrated around, you know, the use of the S word everywhere?
Right? Oh, well, I'm deeply frustrated by the use of the S word because, well, but there's two things at play here. In reality, when we started out trying to make the brand more responsible, I never even saw that word. So we were literally knocking on doors and just trying to make sense of what it all meant. And so what I see now on the vendor side is everyone is using that language. And so even though I do find it to be frustrating, it's, in a way, it has to engender some optimism, because you're seeing that everyone knows this is an important topic. And if you want to have relevant products, they have to fall under this umbrella. So everyone is following suit. I didn't do a deep enough dive into and you know, I think one of the main things about sustainability too is just picking a few partners and working with them. And so I know there's a lot of phenomenal mills out there, and I don't work with them because I want to have a mill that's close proximity to our factory so that it can keep the carbon emissions down and just getting the fabric there. So I didn't really do a deep dive into every vendor there, and there were hundreds. But it's a double-edged sword because I hate the word and I think it's lost all integrity, like I've said. And so when I walk around these things and I just see sustainable, I'm just like, what does it even mean? Like, you need to, you know, but in the sense that everyone is using it, I think that at the end of the day, it must be producing better options for brands, and it must be making it easier for brands to start using better materials. So, you know, and even when I see one of the big fast fashion brands doing their sustainable capsules, which are maybe 0.04% of their total yield for the year, but I think any effort is good effort too. Like, I don't want to be all pessimistic and say it has to be this way or it's not, you know. I think if it's piquing someone's interest when they're walking past and they're thinking, well, but then if they're coming in and they're buying all non-sustainable products, then it's greenwashing and it's problematic. But this is a big topic that I've started
Yeah, I think
down. But
no, I think the idea is that it gives the consumer an option, and if consumers buy only those in the product line, then they would probably have to make more of
I
that
know,
type of thing. But
but I
it's
do
always
think,
going to be a double-edged sword, though. It
but in
just
terms of this last example that I gave, it's the truth is the business model of fast fashion could
that's what
never
I'm saying. It's
be
impossible. That
sustainable
there,
slash responsible. So
that's
it's not even a
impossible. Yeah,
conversation. So
it's
it's
impossible. It's
thanks for
impossible.
the
Yeah,
effort, but it
yeah.
has more integrity to just do what you're doing. Like,
Exactly.
fine.
Because then it's just, yeah. I mean, there. Look, this is a real. Again, we can go down this really crazy topic, but it's almost like what's the word where if you get sued for like advertising and it's like not basically you're just like it's false claims, right?
Well, and there's no
Essentially.
regulations around
And
any
this
sort
is
of
what I'm getting
sustainable,
to is
right?
like
Yeah.
it is if you say this word, right, you can't have false advertising if let's say 50% of your product line is not such a there needs to be,
Well, and the
you know,
European Union is putting that into play or trying to. And I think that those efforts will actually put a framework in place finally that at least, it'll start separating the people with good intentions to the people who are just using the language. But I will say, I honestly think not a lot of the time, but I think there's a big chunk of greenwashing that is not ill-intentioned. I think a lot of the
for
times
sure.
people, designers and stuff will go and they will talk
Just
to a vendor
uneducated.
and they'll take it at face value and go,
Yep.
oh, there's that word and there's that recycled water bottle. Let's just take
Yep.
that and throw it on the wall of the store. And we did it and we're good. And they
Yeah.
are well-meaning, but they didn't ask any hard questions. They didn't do any deep dives. And so everyone is taking everything at face value and then passing this greenwashing thing along. And people aren't sitting there going, excellent, we are going to, it's not malicious.
They're doing what's
like
easy,
that.
right? They're just doing
They're just doing what's easy. Okay, this
Yeah.
worked. Cool, we did it. Sustainable. Thanks for throwing that up there. But that's the thing. At this point, if you're not asking the hard questions and prepared to get some answers that are going to be tough and challenging to move through, then
Because the tough thing is what you guys did. It's you're gonna have to take a step back and rethink your entire supply chain, your entire ecosystem, and even your entire business model. And that's a hard fact, and most companies won't do that. Majority won't, right? I mean, this is going to be a very, very small amount of
Well, and that
companies
was
that
something so symbolic about taking a step back and
Yep.
literally taking a step back on the alphabet, like I said, to R, and just using responsibility and staying there comfortably. Because if you're not prepared to do difficult things that are going to make it like to be a denim brand that doesn't have plastic stretch is just, it doesn't happen.
How difficult would that be, right? Is that something that these big denim brands can only do in like 10% of their line, right? And then they say, hey, this is our sustainable line, and that's it.
I mean, let me be fair that I think we had it easier because of the size of the business.
Fair.
The plastic-free stretch, the natural rubber, is not cheap. It's expensive. And so when you're a company that has shareholders and bottom lines and things like that, and you want to propose using a fabric that's $4 more per yard because of this and this, and everyone's thinking, but the other stuff works, right? Well, then I think we're just going to go ahead and stick with that because bottom line. And so, I think we were in a unique position because of the size of the company, and we were able to be limber and pivot and do these things. But if you're a huge company or even just a bigger company than ours, it's a harder thing to implement for sure. So I guess to be fair, we had that on our side. But the point I'm trying to make is that do what you're going to do, but don't lean on language that is not really carrying the level of integrity.
But it's trending, right? So these big brands just hop on whatever's trending. right? And that's how they maneuver, that's how they move. And so if it's something's hot, they're gonna take it for as long as it's top of mind for people, and then it'll be something else, right? Like that's just how they move and how they work. But my hope is that, the smaller brands, the smaller batch brands, like they continue to get supported economically through consumer habits that, you know, eventually they might just go out of business, and then those people don't lose jobs. Those people go work for
And
the
that's the
responsible
point.
companies, right?
If you look at the pie chart of the market share that's available, there
Yeah,
is room for everybody.
it's
It doesn't have to
insane.
be
Yeah.
one or two companies taking 90%. We
Yep.
all can have room in here to run healthy businesses that keep people
Yep.
employed, that have great lives, that do better things, that inspire better materials. That world is available to us if we decide to switch into it. And so that
Thousand
comes
percent.
from the consumer. And one of the most important things that I realized on this whole journey, because parallel to this whole sustainable pivot I can't believe I just used that word. Parallel to the responsible pivot of Triarchy was also a responsible pivot for myself personally, and trying to figure out what about our humanity got us to where we are right now. And I looked at it from a macro perspective, and it became really clear to me that we are designed to react on impulse. And then all of these things that have come up in the last 10 years have been designed to just make that reaction to impulse time even shorter and quicker.
Yep.
And just now, move, buy, like what's next? Instagram, Snapchat, all the things, TikTok, let's see and so it just became really clear to me that if you give yourself pause in any decision-making process, and I always, whenever I talk to students and stuff, it's just, you give yourself, whenever you want to buy anything online, in real life, you love it, you're excited, you have it in your hand, put it down for a few minutes and just walk away, go grab a coffee, go to the bathroom. If you're on your computer, just literally move away and let that dopamine impulse moment pass, and then come back and re-engage, and notice how many times you don't continue checking out, because it's just a human chemical thing in our brains. It's just, I want this, the chemicals are flowing, I need to satisfy it. And if you're not giving yourself that moment to pause, and you're just reacting on impulse all the time, why do you think you have a closet full of stuff you never wear, or you wore once and you're like, I don't really want that? So it's the whole, and then I just, during the pandemic, because I didn't leave the house for a year, I wrote a book on this, because it's just what are things you can do in your life to just make your life better? Just brief little lessons on these little things you can do that you don't need any tools for, that you just have to realize that they're happening, and then put them aside for a minute. And then notice how much less you consume, and how much less you need to go here and do this and do that. And just, there's nothing more luxurious than peace, and just time and peace and quiet. And,
What's the book called?
Setting an Intention, 11 brief lessons on achieving your greater good.
Available on Amazon?
It is, yeah. Yeah. And it's just, I wrote this it's literally 11 chapters, and they're brief. The story on how this all came to be is in the introduction, and it's pretty funny. And then each chapter is paired with this little narrative story about the hero, which is you climbing up the side of a pyramid, and how you implement the lesson from the chapter into getting to the top of the pyramid. And then from the top of the pyramid, you can see everything. And it's just a little tale,
I like to end on a little bit of the future. So, 3 to 5 years, what goals do you want to succeed in, from a company and brand perspective? And it could be from personal as well. But when you look at that 3 to 5 year, window, what are some of the goals that you want to achieve?
I think that one of the goals that's really important to me is growing a brand responsibly, as much as making responsible products. And so we're having a really nice moment, and and we're in all the stores we've ever wanted to be in, and the partners are very invested in us, and it's great. But I think it would be really nice to just work with those partners and grow a nice business without, how do we blow this up?
Right.
And so that also allows me the time to keep working with mills to innovate fabrics. We just had this amazing collaboration that's coming out with Bergdorf Goodman, and it's a non-GMO cotton that's just completely like natural cotton, never touched, never altered, and the seed and the cotton is brown. And so when you weave the denim, it's this beautiful dark brown color that we would be used to because of dyes. And this is literally just the plant. And so things like that really excite me. And so to be able to have the time and those non-reactive moments to just sit and think about what direction can we take fabrics? What direction can we take thread? What direction can we take buttons? I just saw the coolest thing I saw in Amsterdam was biodegradable button for jeans. How cool is that? Because that's a big problem when you want to compost something, you have to take the hardware off, but this button it biodegrades. Things like that are so cool, and they are what progress this industry. So to be able to just keep innovating on fabrics and dyes and processes and just making our products as circular as possible, and then continuing to responsibly grow the business in a way that it'll reach people and can resonate with them in their moments of pause. I think something about that feels so calm to me. And I think that's fashion is always so fast paced and frantic, and I need it and you have it and who's this and who's that. And I think it can be a lot calmer.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I value a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we can do another episode another time around, I always like to say, like, finding your scale, because we always talk about growth and scale, but that could mean different things to different people and to different companies, right? Because you might have a number, say, hey, we want to just do annual sales of this, because if we go to this point, can we still scale our responsibility, scale our impact?
And at some point, no.
Yeah, at some point, no. Exactly. At some point, no. So like there's always, to me, there's always a growth or a scale to a point where you say, okay, meet this goal. Now let's think about different ways we can double down on our responsibility, right? Since we've reached this pinnacle, let's look at different ways. Well, thanks so much, Adam. This was great conversation. I love having these in-depth talks with people who just understand the industry, man, and have taken really a step back in their own lives and then their company's lives to assess or reassess, what their work in life wants to be like, right? You're dedicating so much time to this, you might as well do something interesting and original, right? That you can talk about that nobody else is doing. So, best of luck for the next decade.
Right on. You too.